Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano, and today we're going to delve into a pressing issue. It transcends party lines. You know, we have this ever-expanding, all-powerful government, the growing surveillance state that exists, and the extent to which our government has encroached on our liberties, it's alarming. And the real question out there, why aren't more people upset about this? Why aren't the American people more outraged about this? I don't get it. As regular listeners to this podcast, I've never shied away from critiquing the ever-expanding power of our government, the rise in censorship, and the weaponization of our political institutions. I focused a lot on the Democrats' role in these trends. I constantly harp on it. But today, I'm going to explore it from a different angle, one that may surprise you, because we're going to examine how some Republicans traditionally associated with limited government and individual freedoms, I'm going to focus on how some of them seem to have no qualms about embracing this ever-growing surveillance state. They have no problems with endorsing censorship measures. And always remember, it was a Republican president, with most Republicans supporting it, that pushed through the largest expansion in our history, the largest expansion of government in our history. You have to understand that throughout history, the struggle for freedom has always been an ongoing battle. It's not something that you don't have to constantly keep on top of. And the fight against oppressive governments that infringe upon our basic rights has been at the heart of a lot of our pivotal moments, not just in American history, but human civilization. You have the Magna Carta to the American Revolution, countless other movements. When you look at the American system, though, we were unique, we were special. How many have valiantly given their lives to secure liberty, to maintain our freedoms? And not just our liberty, but millions around the world. In the United States, the Founding Fathers laid the groundwork for a nation that's built on the principles of individual liberty, limited government, the protection of citizens' rights. We have the United States Constitution, we have the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, all crafted with the intent of safeguarding these cherished liberties. They were all designed to limit the encroachment of national power. But over the years, Democrats and Republicans, while they claim to embrace these principles, while they claim that they want to defend their erosion, guardians of democracy, they're protecting democracy, it's all a lie. Because we have a five-alarm fire going on. The expansion of government power, surveillance programs, rise of censorship, weaponization within our institutions. They raise serious questions about the commitment of both political parties to upholding the rights of the people. People that they have sworn to serve and protect. And it's frustrating to witness how certain government agencies have been involved in these abuses of power, blurring the lines between legitimate national security interests and the violation of individual privacy. We have programs like the NSA's PRISM program that collected the metadata on every single American. You have the CIA's data collection efforts on Americans, the Postal Service's ICOP program, the FBI's illegal access to the NSA repository on Americans, hundreds of thousands of illegal FISA queries. These agencies have tested the limits of public trust, and the abuses of power are evident, but nobody does a damn thing about it. These abuses underscore the need for transparent oversight and accountability mechanisms, but the most frustrating thing is that those people with the power to actually conduct oversight, the ones we elected to Congress, they could care less. And that's what bothers me a lot. They could care less. They support the growing apparatus. And how many ordinary Americans also seem to have no problems with these government abuses? How many ordinary Americans support it? I mean, listen, the coronavirus pandemic was eye-opening to see how many Americans would just willingly give up their liberties because of a threat, because of fear. It really was astounded, because that's not supposed to be our country. And yet you had so many people saying the government should be doing more. In fact, that's all we hear. The government should be doing more in regards to all these issues. You hear from Democrats, you hear from Republicans. As citizens, we have a responsibility to be vigilant. We have a responsibility to be engaged. We have a responsibility to hold our elected representatives accountable for their actions. And we need to push reforms that prioritize the protection of our rights above any other issue that exists out there, because our rights are paramount. Issues come and go. Crises come and go. But the removal of liberty does not come and go. It only goes in one direction until you have the authoritarian regime that we claim we don't want. The fight for liberty and the defense of our freedoms, they're not exclusive to one political party over the other. And it requires us to be united in that front to ensure that the government remains a servant of the people. Unfortunately, so many have lost sight of this, particularly within government, who no longer think that they're servants of the people. They think that the people are there to serve them and their interests. So today, I want to focus on how Republicans seem to be justifying the surveillance state, how Republicans are justifying the ever-expanding powers of the federal government, and I'm going to talk about the motivations behind their apparent alignment with these ideas. Their actions are not rooted in national security concerns. Do not listen to these people. They claim they're doing all this to protect the American people. That is a lie. Now, before I jump in, make sure you visit the P.A.S. Report website, PASreport.com. Share this episode with your family and friends and on social media, because this is the issue of our lifetime. There's no bigger issue that's bigger than this. Before I get into these programs, I do want to jump into this whole Devon Archer thing that broke this week. And it's just astounding when you look at government. It really is. And it really is frustrating. Devon Archer, former business partner to Hunter Biden, goes to testify before Congress. Now, 2 days before that, the Department of Justice sends a letter to the federal courts to speed up a sentencing hearing and send Devon Archer off to prison. Now, Devon Archer was found guilty. Now, remember, this is Hunter Biden's business partner. Devon Archer was found guilty, ironically, of tax evasion. He didn't get the Hunter Biden treatment. So he's scheduled to testify. The Department of Justice on a Saturday sends a letter to the court. Now, they could have waited till Tuesday to send this letter after Devon Archer testified, but they sent it on a Saturday. And the media says, well, it's no big deal, that it wasn't political interference or anything like that. They weren't trying to get Devon Archer to prison before he could testify before Congress. It's all lies. I mean, listen, the reality is that even though the Department of Justice made this request, it still takes several weeks to process and to actually send him off to prison. So no. The intent wasn't to send him to prison before he testified. I'll admit that. However, why send this letter on a Saturday? The Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, I mean, it's not like Saturday is your normal business day. The courts, the federal courts, on a Saturday aren't doing normal business operating hours. So they went out of their way to send this letter to the courts on a Saturday. Do you think it was meant to just either be spiteful or to intimidate Devon Archer? Now, I don't know the answer to that. That would be speculation on my part. But I find it a little odd that the Department of Justice would rush on a Saturday, like this issue was so pressing that it couldn't wait till Tuesday to send this letter to get Devon Archer a sentencing hearing and send him off to prison. If you think that's a coincidence, you're part of the problem. Now, even worse than that was Devon Archer did testify before Congress. Reportedly, he detailed how President Biden, the big guy himself, remember, the guy who said that he never got involved in Hunter Biden's business affairs, the guy that said that he never met any of Hunter Biden's business associates. Well, Devon Archer said that that's not true. What a shocker, right? He said that's not true. He said Joe Biden called into several meetings that he did meet with several business partners of Hunter Biden's. And it really is amazing when you see the lies over the last several years. It's not Hunter Biden's laptop. It's Russian disinformation. I never had any type of knowledge of Hunter Biden's business affairs. I mean, he's throwing his son under the bus when he says that. But he's the family guy, right? Who doesn't even acknowledge his granddaughter. And the only reason he acknowledges his granddaughter is because of political pressure and the press is covering it. So now he acknowledges the seventh grandchild. In any event, so Devon Archer conflicts directly with what President Biden and his administration have been telling the American people for several years. Here's the awesome thing. Here is the amazing part. Devon Archer testifies that the reason that Biden would call in and speak is to enhance the Biden brand. That's what Devon Archer testified. Here is Democrat Congressman Dan Goldman. Here is what he had to say when he spoke to the press after the Devon Archer testimony.
So to confirm, you're saying that the speakerphone conversations, they don't seem concerning to you because there is no specifics about business and it just seemed like
it was clear that it was as part of the daily conversations that Hunter Biden had with his father, and it was and sounded like most of the time now President Biden didn't even know who the people he was at dinner. He was just asked to say hello. And he would, talk about the way he described it several times. They asked over and over and over. He described what the weather was, how what's going on your end. The witness was very, very consistent that none of those conversations ever had to do with any business dealings or transactions. They were purely what he called casual conversations.
Right. So according to Congressman Dan Goldman, the only thing that would be discussed when President Biden called into these meetings would be the weather. Things like that.
Come on, give me a break, man.
Does anyone not realize, does anyone not see that we've reached a point of absurdity in this country? To even think that the American people are just that stupid, that we're going to believe that the only thing when Biden called in that they discussed was things like the weather. I mean, this is insanity. But yet they think that we're going to believe it. And I guess it speaks to how little regard they have for us, how low they think of us. And it's not just Congressman Dan Goldman that's pushing this BS. You also have the media outlets who are now saying that, well, President Biden, he wasn't really providing access. He wasn't really running an influence peddling scheme. This was all about Hunter Biden creating the illusion of access to Joe Biden. Now, think about how this has changed over the course of the last several years. Remember, it went from, I never had any discussions or ever met with Hunter's business partners, to now it's the illusion of President Biden being involved. So don't believe your eyes, don't believe your ears. It was all fake to give the appearance that Biden was running an influence peddling scheme. And it fits in line with all the other lies and BS that they put out there. The idea that it used to be, there's no evidence that Joe Biden had any involvement in Hunter Biden's business affairs. Now, what they say is there's no prosecutable evidence that Joe Biden had any involvement in Hunter Biden's business affairs. Now, it's not that he never met with Hunter Biden's business partners. Now, he never got involved in the business aspect of Hunter Biden's business. So you are being played, the American people are being played, and yet 50% of the country could actually care less about the corruption of the Biden family business. They don't care. They say that there's no evidence that exists. They live in an alternate reality. It's really mind-boggling. But I don't want to harp on this because I want to get to Republicans and take certain Republicans to task. I'm constantly harping on Democrats. Well, it's time to point to Republicans because they're part of the problem. So we're going to take a quick break. After this break, we'll be right back. P.A.S. report listeners, our government is out of control. Criminal tax hikes, hyperinflation, a full-blown recession. It's part of the grand plan. The billions of dollars Biden keeps sending to the corrupt government in Ukraine, the trillions in new taxes he wants to shove down your throat, the electronic banking system crash that resets everyone to zero, checking accounts, saving accounts, 401ks, IRAs, all of it, zero. But you don't have to be a victim. Protect your money and get up to $10,000 in free silver to do it when you call Goldco. Goldco's helped protect over $2 billion in gold and silver for people like you and me. They're offering you up to $10,000 in bonus silver when opening a qualified IRA account just for being a supporter of the P.A.S. report. So whether you want to protect $50,000 or $500,000 or more, this is your opportunity to protect yourself from our out-of-control government. Don't be a victim and call Goldco today. 855-656-0196, 855-656-0196, or go to goldco.com/PAS report. Welcome back, everyone. So I want to highlight now the Republicans and the problem in the Republican Party, where you have people like Senator Romney that doesn't mind the ever-growing surveillance state. He doesn't mind the censorship efforts. You have tons of Republicans that constantly claim that they care about the national debt, yet when they were in power, they exploded the national debt, just like Democrats do. They have no problem giving more and more power to the all-powerful bureaucracy already. And last week, there was a spat between Senator Romney and Senator Rand Paul. And it was an interesting spat. Senator Paul introduced an amendment to a bill that would prevent government officials from reaching out to social media companies and media outlets telling them to remove information that the government deems as misinformation or disinformation. Now, I'm going to play a clip because it's about a 5-minute clip, and I want you to take a listen to the back and forth between Romney and Senator Rand Paul. This way it'll set up what I want to talk about.
The reason is, in my view, it's overly broad in prohibiting any employee of the federal government from cajoling or arguing with a member of the media about a story. Employees of the federal government have First Amendment rights too. And if, let's say, President Trump or President Biden disagreed with something that was going to be written about them, this would make it a crime for them to call up the social media company and say, that's a lie, take it down, this is outrageous. That's not censorship. Censorship is when the government shuts something off. This is arguing to try and convince someone else to shut it off. And that's the right people have, whether they're in government or outside of government. Obviously, there are places where people go over the line and make threats and suggest you're going to lose your license if you don't do the following thing. That, if it's narrow enough to be defined in that kind of way, I'd be happy to take a look at it. But to say that no employee of the government, from the president on down to the millions of people who work in the government, can speak with a social media company or a legacy media company and express their point of view that an article is wrong or that an avenue they're going down is wrong, that would shut off free speech on the part of the administration and power, or frankly, employees that have nothing to do with one party or the other. So in my view, it's an amendment that is overly broad and hasn't considered what's going to happen when there's a Republican administration that wants to argue that the media is saying crazy things about them. Would make it a crime to do so. Even the press secretary responding to a question, saying, no, that's wrong, you guys have got that wrong, well, that would violate the law.
The First Amendment really isn't about protecting the speech of government workers. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. It's about limitations on government involvement with speech. It doesn't say that where you're employed that there might not be regulations of what can be said. Every employee of a private company knows you can't run in the office and say your boss stinks. I mean, there are limitations on your speech based on your employment, and they have nothing to do with the First Amendment, because the First Amendment doesn't have really to do with employment. The First Amendment has to do with Congress shall pass no law. So if Twitter says bad things about me and puts up bad things and takes my down, I have no recourse against Twitter. Same with Facebook. I'm mad. I hate that YouTube has taken my speeches down. I don't do business with them anymore because I think they're bigoted, biased, and wrong-headed on this. But as far as threats, what we do know from the Twitter files is that the government was making threats. We also know this from the depositions in Missouri versus Biden. The threats were, if you don't do this, there may be antitrust action against you. These were overt threats, and this is what's going to make this case so strong. When this gets to the Supreme Court, I think that the free speech advocates are going to win. This is a lawsuit began by Senator Eric Schmidt when he was the Attorney General. But I think the evidence is pretty strong that there were threats. There were threats of antitrust action against the companies if they didn't take the material down. There was also threats of, we will remove your 230 protection. Section 230 gives them liability protection, and they were overt threats and threats in writing, basically saying, if you don't take this down, your 230 protection of liability could go away. We may try to penetrate that liability protection. Finally, there were also information that went back and forth saying that this goes to the top levels of the White House. So the implication being to whoever the top person over at Twitter is, the president knows you're not listening. The president knows. But the thing is even if none of those overt threats were made, the fact of the FBI showing up at your office and describing that it would be a good idea to take down information, and just maybe they bring you a cup of coffee, Gatorade or something, and tea, and say, we just think it would be a good idea, But they come armed. They come with the threat of prosecution, even if they don't say it because they're from the government. I think the government should be absolutely prohibited, without question. I think it should be as draconian as you probably can make it, and the exception would be illegal. The government is allowed to meet with illegal, but things that are an opinion, the government has no business in this.
Man, I wish Senator Rand Paul was running for president, and I wish he could win the presidency, because he seems to be the only person within our government and I'm talking about Congress now. There are some good people in government. I'm not dismissing all of them. But Senator Paul is the only one that actually has principles, lives by those principles, and he always errs on the side of less government involvement. And it's really refreshing. If we had a bunch of Senator Rand Pauls in the House and the Senate and the presidency, we wouldn't have 90% of the problems that we're witnessing today. We need less Mitt Romneys. That's what we need less of. Mitt Romney is your worst type of politician. He is the worst type of snake. And I will say that I will take 1,000 AOCs any day of the week over Mitt Romney.
How dare you!
I'm sure some of you blew a gasket with me just saying that, but I have no problem saying that. At least I know where AOC stands. At least I know where Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I know what her political positions are, and I know she believes in those political positions, and I know that that's what her goals and objectives are going to be. When you look at someone like Mitt Romney, he is nothing more than a snake. And all you have to do is look at his relationship with former President Trump. In 2012, he came out and he begged President Trump for his endorsement. And President Trump gave that endorsement. In 2016, when President Trump was running, Mitt Romney said he's not qualified to be the President of the United States. He doesn't have the moral character. Fine. If someone believes that, I don't care if they're Democrat, Republican, what side of the aisle are they on? If they believe that, that's their choice. But then when Trump wins the election, Romney goes to him, slithering like the snake he is, and begs him to become Secretary of State. When that didn't work, he then ran for the Senate seat in Utah, and he begged President Trump for the endorsement. Now, if you are sitting there saying that President Trump isn't moral enough to hold the position of presidency, that he's basically a horrible human being, and he's such an immoral person, why are you kissing his butt for his endorsement? Now, President Trump gave him the endorsement. And then shortly after Romney won that Senate seat, what did he do? Well, he stated that, President Trump should be disqualified. He shouldn't be in office. He should be removed from office. So Romney is your worst type of snake that tries to do everything to his own benefit. He projects himself to be this holier than thou, this moral holy warrior that's fighting for what's right, but he's a fraud. Understand that. And I don't like frauds. So again, AOC is not a fraud. She says what she means. I may disagree with her on every little thing she says, but at least I know where she stands. With Romney, you don't know where he stands. With the clip I played between him and Rand Paul, he's lying to the American people. It's not that a government official can't call and say, hey, that's wrong information about me. He knows damn well what this is about. This is about blatant censorship of what the government was deeming misinformation and disinformation of political opinions. People freely expressing their political positions on particular issues, their thoughts on particular issues. That's what it's about. The government was weaponized, targeted one group of people, and we're going to take a quick break. When I get back, I'm going to explain what he wants. P.A.S. report listeners, hurricane season is almost here, and the time to prepare is right now, not when the hurricane hits. When Hurricane Ida hit the Gulf Coast, it destroyed countless homes and left many without access to food and clean water. Millions lost power, some for weeks. The floods that followed the hurricane washed out roads, made it impossible for grocery stores to restock their shelves. Families were desperate. They were waiting for help that was slow to arrive. But what if you didn't have to rely on FEMA to provide for your family during a crisis? The answer is simple. Be prepared with emergency food kits from 4 Patriots. Their long-lasting and delicious food options are specifically designed to provide you and your loved ones with the sustenance you need when you need it most. And these food kits are hand-packed in the USA, last up to 25 years, compact inside covert storage totes, include a wide variety of delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, and they're backed by thousands of 5-star customer reviews. 4 Patriot survival food is not just for natural disasters. In today's world of uncertain supply chains and unpredictable emergencies, it's more important than ever to have a backup plan. Whether it's temporary power outage, a winter blizzard, rising food costs, you can rest easy knowing that you have a reliable source of food to see you through. And right now, you go to 4patriots.com, use code P.A.S. to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the emergency food supply kits that are designed to last up to 25 years. Just go to 4patriots.com, use code P.A.S. to get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriots survival food. Welcome back, everyone. So this is not what Senator Romney claims. It's not about telling the press or social media companies that a story's wrong or that it's inaccurate. This is about censorship. That's what it's about. And it's about opinions being censored. See, what Romney and people like him don't mind is when you have people like Carol Crawford of the Centers for Disease Control coming out and telling Twitter that they must censor opinions that they believe are unapproved opinions, as if we need to go to the government to get approval for our opinions. This is about the White House coordinating with Facebook and new Facebook documents. So we have the Twitter files, now we got the Facebook files, where the White House was actually targeting anything and everything that it didn't like, from memes and jokes about the coronavirus, about masks. They would sit there and they would try and get Facebook to suppress these types of posts, to remove these types of posts for jokes that they didn't like. So it shows you how manipulative this is. But see, Romney doesn't have a problem with censorship, and many Republicans don't have a problem with censorship. They actually believe that the government should have the right to suppress people's way of thinking, to suppress people's freedom of speech. They believe that government has that absolute right, and they do it in the name of protecting you, that you are too stupid to understand and disseminate what information's accurate and what information's not accurate, that you are too stupid to understand all these conspiracy theories, and you're going to buy into these conspiracy theories because you don't have the intelligence to analyze the information. You don't have the capabilities to do the research for that information. And so then it must be the government that determines what you can see and what you can't, what you could hear and what you can't, what you could watch and what you can't. See, members of Congress, they think that they're all on the high and mighty. Members in the bureaucracy think that they're the all-powerful, all-knowing. And they have little regard for the American people. They look at the American people as part of the problem. That's how much they have lost touch with the whole intent behind the United States. The government does not get to dictate what opinions can be expressed and which ones can't. And if we're going to go down the road where the government can dictate that, you no longer live in a free country. That free country of the United States is gone. We are in a completely new era of authoritarianism, all in an effort to save, or what they deem to save, democracy. Does that sound like we're saving democracy? Does it sound like we're saving the constitutional republic? But they have no regard for the Constitution. If they had regard for the Constitution, they wouldn't do 1/10 of the things that they do and get away with. They would actually hold people accountable for the abuses of power, and that's what Senator Rand Paul wants to do. In his amendment, it would allow ordinary people, it would remove sovereign immunity. So the federal government has what's called sovereign immunity. It can't be sued for anything and everything. It's been well established. What Rand Paul wants to do is he wants to remove sovereign immunity if you were censored, where if you were censored by the federal government, you have a right to sue the federal government and the social media companies. That's what his amendment would do. And there is nothing wrong with that. Always err on the side of freedom. Always err on the side of less government involvement. That's what we should be doing. Unfortunately, we side on more government involvement in every single issue. And it's mind-boggling. So when I say that Republicans don't care about this big power apparatus, they don't. It's the same BS we hear constantly. What they care about is power, both Republican and Democrat. And they believe that the national government has the right to determine what information can be disseminated and what information can't. And if you want the clearest example of how Republicans really don't care, all you have to do is look back. I believe it was either 2018 or 2019, the last time FISA was reauthorized. Now, during this time, Devin Nunes, former Congressman Devin Nunes, he exposed a lot of the abuses that were taking place within the FISA system. He exposed the abuses of power by the FBI. And so when the FISA renewal came up, they could have amended it. They could have provided more protections to make sure that the government didn't abuse its power and wouldn't going forward. They could have provided more oversight to the FISA court and the FISA process. But what did Republicans do? Well, they just reauthorized it without any real changes whatsoever. They reauthorized it because they believe that one day they get to use these tools. And they do believe in the national security state. They do believe in the surveillance state. That's what it comes down to. Just look at fiscal responsibility. We constantly have Republicans coming out there talking about fiscal restraint and balanced budgets, and they're all full of crap, right? You notice how none of them ever say, well, we need to cut spending across the board, including defense. Instead, it's we need to cut spending in all these areas, but we need to increase defense spending. Well, why? Why do we need to increase defense spending? We spend more than every single country that exists out there. The closest, we spend about $850 billion a year on our defense industry. The closest comes China. They report about $350 billion a year. It's probably closer to $450 billion, and because China's not going to release accurate information. But what is the money going to? Like, you're telling me that we can't cut the Defense Department when the Defense Department's instituting diversity, equity, inclusion programs at West Point, Naval Postgrad School? I mean, you're telling me we can't, find areas of defense that we need to cut? There are plenty of areas. There's plenty of waste in the Department of Defense that we can cut. But it's the sacred cow of Republicans, right? We need a strong defense. So it goes to show you that they're all frauds. We could still have a strong defense and be fiscally responsible and cut the defense budget and reprioritize what are the important mission areas of the military. When it comes to other government agencies, how many members of Congress, and I'm talking about Republican members of Congress, how many of them have shown concern about the abuses of power that we're witnessing? It's not many. Most of them simply don't care about it because they don't view it as abuses of power. They don't even view the CIA spying on sitting members of the United States Senate Intelligence Committee and their staff members being spied on by the CIA. Like, if that wasn't a wake-up call to them, I don't know what will be, but they don't care. You don't hear about them really talking, and I'm talking about having a legitimate, realistic conversation about providing more oversight to the agencies and departments. And just think about it this way. I mean, you're probably sick of me saying it, but I constantly bring up the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism, where the Biden administration has actually lowered the threshold of what it could take to consider someone a domestic terrorist. It's no longer violent anti-government or anti-authority sentiment. Now it's just anti-government, anti-authority sentiment. Anyone expressing those can be deemed as a domestic terrorist. Have the Republicans in the House and have Republican members of the Senate, have they held one damn hearing on the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism? Have they held one hearing? And the answer is no, they have not. Have they asked one question to Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, the CIA Director, or any other government entity, Department of Homeland Security? Have they asked one single question about how this new national strategy for countering domestic terrorism has impacted the agencies, has impacted the agency mission, has impacted the agency's focus? Do you hear any Republicans asking those questions? And the answer is no. If you believe that the majority of Republicans actually care about individual liberty, if you believe that the majority of Republicans actually care about fiscal responsibility, then Hunter Biden was selling the illusion of access to the big guy. It was an illusion. We have to recognize that this country is unique for the sole purpose of how the Founding Fathers took this idea of liberty from the theoretical and how they brought it into a reality. How we were the ones that were supposed to be in charge of the system, how we were the ones that was supposed to limit government power. But instead, we lost sight. We lost sight of what the ultimate goal was. And the reason that we lost sight is, one, because of our failed education system that does not in any way teach students about the fundamental principles, about the difference between liberty and freedom. Like, you have two words, and most can't differentiate those words. They cannot define those words. So we have a failed education system that never taught about the founding principles of this country, the Founding Fathers, the intent behind the system, the roles and responsibilities of the institutions. That's one failure. And then the other failure is that we got comfortable. We got complacent. And we don't like to do things ourselves because it may be hard. We may realize that we might not be able to fix some of the problems that exist. And so we just point it off to the government, all these issues. And how's that been working out for you? How's it been working out? Because it seems that they haven't really fixed or solved any of the issues. It seems that the more government involvement there is, the more problems there are. Think about how much our government has expanded over the course of the last 20, 25, 30, 40, 100 years. Think about how much it's expanded. Has your life gotten easier as the government has expanded, or has it gotten more difficult? And why do you think it's gotten more difficult? Why do you think it's gotten more complicated? Why do you think it's gotten more burdensome? And the reason is because of that government expansion. A government expansion that views the people as the problem. Not the politicians, not the bureaucrats. They're the righteous, moral, holy warriors. We better wake up and open our eyes. Unfortunately, we haven't had to sacrifice much. We've had it pretty good. And that's part of the problem. When you have it good, you tend to ignore all these things. But there is going to come a reckoning. And what I mean by that, I'm not talking about people going to rebel against the system or there's going to be a revolution. I'm talking about one day you are going to wake up. And the idea of liberty is going to be gone. And the luxuries that you enjoy today will be gone as well. The easy life that you know will disappear. And you're going to sit there and say to yourself, I should have spoken up. I should have done more. I should have gotten involved. I should have seen the warning signs. But by then, it's going to be too late. We need to wake up and do the responsible thing. And the responsible thing is holding people accountable. Voting those out of office that showed no regard for you and no regard for our fundamental principles. Demand that they recognize that they're servants of the people. It's not the other way around. And that members of Congress need to do their damn job. I don't care what political party they belong to. Life comes with risks. And I'd rather have less government and increase the risk than have more government. You want to be safe? Go to North Korea. You can walk down any block in North Korea, and you're very safe. You're not going to get mugged. You're not going to get robbed or stabbed or shot. Do you want to live like the North Koreans do? So open your eyes to see what's really going on out there, because both parties are responsible for the position that we're in. Now, if you found the content of this episode informative, please leave the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating. Take 30 seconds to write a good review and share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. For today, I want to thank you for joining me. I hope you have an amazing rest of the week. And I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.